You're listening to the Wool Academy podcast. This is episode number 36.
Hello and welcome. My name is Elisabeth van Delden, and once a week we talk to an industry expert from the wool industry supply chain from farm to fashion and beyond, delivering strategies and insights to be successful in wool and showcasing those beautiful stories wool has to tell.
My Wool Academy guest today is Dave Maslen. Dave is the Global Partnerships Manager at the New Zealand Merino Company, in short NZM. I will ask Dave in a minute to explain to us exactly what his responsibilities are as Global Partnerships Manager. Dave has a background in environmental science and sustainable land management and is engaged globally with a broad range of agencies focused on sustainability. Welcome, Dave. Thank you for being on the show today. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to talking about what we do here.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, as I just said, you are the Global Partnerships Manager, and you did give me beforehand a short summary of your job description, but it was so compact and dense of so many responsibilities that I thought instead of me reading to our listeners today, it's best that you really tell us what you do and also tell us a little bit more about yourself and then also introduce NZ Merino to us.
Perfect. So as you said, my name's Dave Maslen. I work at the New Zealand Merino Company. I've been in this role now for nearly 11 years. My role started out in research and development and running R&D programs within the company, and I've moved now more into a sales and marketing role. So my day-to-day responsibility is for the development of relationships and partnerships at all stages of the supply chain with all of our wool partners. So that's everybody from end retail brands that are using New Zealand wool, right through to supply chain partners, spinners, top makers, and so forth that are processing our wool, and also with our growers in New Zealand that are producing it. I also manage our ZQ accreditation program, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on, and with a background in sustainability, I still also manage a lot of the research and development and validation projects that we have here to try and I think establish the platforms of integrity that sit behind our wool program. So that's what I do. The New Zealand Merino Company as a business, we're based obviously here in New Zealand. We've been operating as a commercial entity now for around 21 years. We've got a slightly different model to many of the other wool brokers and so forth in the industry. We work directly with end retail brands and supply chains and link them through to growers through long-term forward contracts. And the way that we do that is all about developing a long-term relationship and partnership between all stages of the value chain, and then negotiating commercial relationships that are going to be sustainable for everybody. And there's a whole range of tools that we have in our toolkit to do that. But yeah, so that's what we do, and that's the New Zealand Merino Company, and it's great to be on the show today.
Okay, thank you for this very quick introduction. So in other words, NZ Merino is like a broker, but with a twist to it.
Yeah, that's a good description. So we have the traditional functions of a broker. However, rather than just transacting the wool via an auction, we tend to build long-term partnerships through the value chain and then support those brands to be successful, because the more successful those brands are, the more wool they're going to need to buy. So that's how our model works.
Okay, great. And from your job description, I can imagine that each day doesn't have enough hours for you.
So, sometimes it feels like days are quite short, yes. But I'm very lucky. We've got a small team here at New Zealand Merino. There's around 45 of us, and we all work very collaboratively. So I've got a lot of support and a very good team in behind me to make sure that we're able to deliver to what we need to do.
And from what you said, I understand that you actually have. Would you say you have two different customer types at NZ Merino, or who are exactly your customers then?
Yeah, we probably have three different customer types. So the first are our growers, whose wool we transact and sell on their behalf. So they're a really critical part of our business, obviously, and without their wool, we can't be in trade. We work with supply chains as well, so that's all stages of the supply chain. We've got top makers, spinners, fabric manufacturers, all of whom are customers of ours, and then we also work with the end retail brands. So brands like Icebreaker, Smart Wool, Ibex, Raider, they're all John Smedley's another one. They're all brand partners that we work with and we have done for many years.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. And what are the different income streams that NZ Merino would typically have?
Yeah, so we're a commercial entity, so we've got multiple income streams. But essentially, our growers make an investment in marketing and R&D to better position their wool, and we take that and we allocate that to developing these partnerships that hopefully result in long-term sustainable contracts for them. So that's the main way that we make money. But there's multiple streams, just like every other commercial company.
Yes, you have to stand on multiple legs nowadays, don't you?
Absolutely.
And maybe summarize for us a little bit, why should farmers or also why should brands work with you at NZM?
So for a grower, our growers made a conscious decision over 20 years ago that they needed to take far more, ownership of their destiny, and they recognised the need for them to be investing directly in their future. To develop markets, it requires investment both in marketing and relationship building, but also in research and development. And so our growers, they established the New Zealand Merino Company to go out and do that, basically to take their wool to the world and to tell their story in a really unique way and to differentiate their product. And that's what we've been able to do. So growers, they invest in us. They see. So what growers get by working through us is, I guess, access to these long-term brands and supply chain partnerships that we've established. And through that, they get access to long-term forward contracts. So we've got some contracts now that extend out 3 years or 5 years, giving them absolute clarity of how much they're going to get paid for their wool every season. From a brand's perspective, why would they work with New Zealand Merino? There's dozens and dozens of different reasons, but fundamentally, the way our business is modelled and designed, it's for us as a team at New Zealand Merino to every day be delivering benefit to a brand in terms of their sales margin and reputation. And if we can't demonstrate how we're going to help a brand sell more product at a better margin while also protecting their reputation, then we don't really have anything to negotiate with when it comes to trying to establish a long-term forward contract. So brands that are purchasing their wool through the New Zealand Merino Company, they're basically getting a suite of marketing, R&D and storytelling assets that we have and that we curate here at New Zealand Merino. But they're also sourcing wool that they know have been produced according to a set of on-farm standards as well. So we run an on-farm accreditation process.
And that maybe leads us already to the question where you mentioned also already earlier that you were going to talk about your ZQ Merino brand. Is that correct? Yeah. How I said? So maybe tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that's closely related to working with the brands, isn't it?
Absolutely. So the ZQ Merino program is something that we developed in 2005, 2006. It's an on-farm standard that all of our growers that are certified and that sell through the ZQ program have to adhere to. And so what it guarantees is that farms meet some specific standards around animal welfare, environmental integrity, social responsibility, fibre quality and traceability. Also involved in ZQ is an on-farm research and development program that we run, which is all around how to improve practice over time, both in terms of farm productivity and profitability, but also how they produce the livestock in the most sustainable and animal-friendly way possible. So that program there is it's an accreditation standard. It's audited by a third party, and every grower has to be accredited to that. And audited to that standard to be able to supply the program.
And if I understand correctly, for the moment you focus mainly on apparel, or do you also work with brands in the area of interiors?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are the New Zealand Merino Company, which implies a focus on merino wool, and that certainly has been the case up until around 2 years ago. We've recently branched out, and we're now transacting wool of all microns. So we have significant volumes of wool going into interior textiles, carpeting, rugs, and upholstery. We've even got a couple of footwear companies that we work with who are making indoor shoes. And using finer wool, making shoes brand called Allbirds. So we supply wool now from around 11.5 micron right through to over 40 micron in diameter, and those are all able to be sourced through the ZQ standard as well. So with that same platform of integrity.
Okay, thanks. That I didn't even know. So good that I always learn something new in these interviews as well. And another word that you mentioned a few times is sustainability. And also on the show, we already had a few guests on the topic of life cycle assessment. And I know that you are also involved in some research in this area. I think you're also a member of the IWTO life cycle assessment technical what is it? TAG? What is the
technical advisory
group. There we go.
Yeah.
So maybe tell us first a little bit what is the motivation for NZM to be involved in this LCA research, and then later we can talk about the research you actually did.
No problem. So one of the key services that we provide to our brand partners is making certain that they're able to be really at the forefront of communicating all aspects of their product from a sustainability perspective or otherwise. Around 2006, 2007, we undertook our first piece of life cycle assessment research, and since then we've done 4 more. So by way of background, one of the challenges with sustainability is that it's such a broad and complicated concept. It's very, very difficult to quantify sustainability in any really meaningful way. One of the tools that are available to us to do that is a process called life cycle assessment. And basically what life cycle assessment does is it accounts for the environmental impacts of a product at every stage of its life cycle. So if we take a woolen sweater, for example, the environmental impact of the farming of the wool, the scouring of the wool, the spinning, the combing, the spinning, the knitting, the manufacture of the garment itself, and then right through to the use phase and disposal. So we worked alongside some industry partners in 2006 initially, and then again in around 2011. To develop the methodologies for doing LCA for wool apparel. It was a really interesting piece of work, and to be perfectly honest, it probably raised more questions than it answered around how LCA is undertaken. So following on from that, I got engaged with the IWTO Sustainable Practices Working Group, who also had a focus on LCA, and we started looking at how we might be able to refine that methodology into a model and a system that really worked more appropriately for wool. Since then, we've done a huge amount of work. We've completed another LCA, and we've actually just in the last week here initiated another small project. And the purpose of this is so that we have a really robust set of data that we can then share with the broader global textile industry to make certain that wool's being accounted for appropriately when it comes to sustainability. I mentioned earlier on that it's really hard to quantify sustainability. Unfortunately, there's a lot of other fibres and a lot of other fabrics and a lot of other manufacturers out there that through the natural laws of competition want to do comparisons. And we're saying, well, that's absolutely fine, but it's really important if we're doing a comparison that we're all working off a similar set of data, or at least we're collecting that data in the same way, making certain that the playing field is level, if you like. And so the focus of the IWTO Sustainable Practices Working Group and the technical advisor group within that is making certain that if wool is going to be sharing data, it's being collected in a way that's consistent with industry best practice, that it's reflective of the entire industry. So, for example, having a look at wool that's produced in New Zealand versus South Africa, Australia, Argentina, Uruguay, or elsewhere, and then putting that through a really consistent methodology to make certain that that we're able to deliver high quality research. So LCA, it's a really complicated tool, and it's by no means perfect, but it's one of the only tools we've got. Interestingly, beyond LCA, we've also been doing a lot of research looking at other aspects of sustainability here in New Zealand, and particularly focused around farming systems. So we've done work looking at water quality. We've had a look at the impact of merino sheep grazing on high country biodiversity. So basically, what impact does sheep farming have on the flora and fauna of the farms that supply the wool? And all of that provides us with data points that we can then use to help better articulate the impact that we're having on the planet as a result of our industry. And then there's another project that we did recently that also sort of speaks a little bit to broader and longer term sustainability, and that's around biodegradation. And we all know that wool biodegrades, but for us to be able to tell a positive story about that, we really need to have a clear understanding about how fast it biodegrades, what happens to the chemicals and so forth that are associated with the wool as it's biodegrading, and so on. So my colleagues and I did a project a couple of years ago where we looked at biodegrading wool samples. We measured the rate and mode of biodegradation, and we also measured the impact of that biodegradation on the receiving soil. And it was a fascinating piece of work that showed that that wool biodegraded very, very rapidly. We've had really good consumer feedback from that. When we did the work, it was perhaps a little before its time, but certainly in the last 18 months, people have started to realise that actually the legacy that we leave on the planet as a result of our apparel purchase decisions is really quite significant, and I guess the impact it has through its life cycle. And then by doing these additional sustainability-based projects, it helps us to reinforce the stories that we're sharing with our brands to help them to be able to give their customers reassurance, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But there was so much information in your answer, so let me try to dig a little bit deeper. So first of all, I would really like to know, because when I was working at IWTO, we did have a few questions coming in, really asking, okay, how long does it really take for a wool, let's say, shirt or sweater to biodegrade? So do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, it depends a little bit on the fabric and the garment itself, and also on the environment. So, for example, soil temperature, soil moisture, they all have a significant impact. In our trial, what we showed was that in excess of 90% of the garment had been biodegraded within 9 months of being buried. And the only areas that were left after that period were areas in the seams, where there's a double thickness of wool, and so therefore less ability for the soil microbes to infiltrate, and then any synthetic threads and labels that the garment might have had, they were still available. But within 9 to 12 months, the garment should be almost 100% biodegraded, and that was for a single jersey knit long sleeve tee.
Okay, so and if I understand correctly, the moisture and warm temperatures are probably ideal for biodegrading. Is that so?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. It's a decomposition process that's driven by soil bacteria and fungi, and those soil bacteria and fungi, like everything else, need a hospitable environment or a habitat for them to live in. So depending on what type they are, they might need more or less water or more or less heat. But that's why it can be variable depending upon climate and so forth.
Okay, but our t-shirt will not biodegrade in our closet. I think that's also important. I think sometimes then people think the opposite, that a wool sweater might biodegrade too quickly, but I don't think that would be the case.
no, you've got to provide the perfect conditions for it to biodegrade. But when you provide those, it will absolutely.
And then another area you mentioned in the beginning is that you did the life cycle or several life cycle assessment studies. And what I remember in particular, also from meeting you at several conferences, is that you were in this unique position because we have the supply chain set up from farm up to consumer level, is that you were actually really able to follow one, I think one was a t-shirt and one was a wool socks, on what is actually their environmental impact and also their use impact. So can you maybe talk a little bit about that particular research?
Yeah, so that was one of the studies we did in 2014, where we followed a pair of socks and a t-shirt from the farm all the way through the supply chain. But what was really interesting about that project was we had a look at the relative impacts of selling those garments in either European or American markets, whether we sold them via online or bricks and mortar retail. And that was all very, very interesting and showed us some slight differences between them. But what was most fascinating was around the use phase. And the work we did there was, initially we just used data that had come out of the cotton industry in terms of how people use their products. And that gave us a useful answer. But when we did some consumer survey work, we surveyed around 3,000 users of products about how they actually use their products, so how often they wash them, and how often they wear them and how long they last for. It showed us that actually the story with wool is very, very positive because you wash it less often, and if you wash it less often, you use a lot less energy and you use a lot less water. We also found that the garments tend to last a long time, which means that people buy less of them by comparison to, for example, a cotton or a polyester product. And so there's some really significant gains that wool can make by comparison to other products, just because of the way that the product is designed, the way that it performs, the way that it doesn't retain odor, the fact that you can wash it less frequently and so forth. So that was a really valuable piece of work, and that's been used to inform some of our brand partners' storytelling within their own brands. But importantly, it's been also used within the IWTO context as they engage with organisations like the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and Made By, who are all trying to develop, an industry scoring system for other textiles. So yeah, it was a good piece of work.
Okay, thanks for explaining that in more detail. And another follow-up question, because we always find that everyone working in wool is so passionate, but how did you find the consumers to be? Are they also really passionate about wool?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And what we find is that people, once they know about wool, they'll never go back. Sometimes I think we're still confronted by the perception that wool is itchy and too hot and so forth, and so that can be a little bit of a challenge. But certainly the brands that we're working with and the experience that those brands are giving their consumers has been to show that if you engage a consumer with a really top quality product and give them a really amazing experience, they'll be advocates of wool for life. And so we're really aware of this when we look at the brands that we work with and the brands that we are willing to share our ZQ brand with. We make certain that those brands are brands that are going to give consumers a really good experience and a consistent experience. Because, as I say, once you go wool, you'll never go back. So yeah, it's all about that initial try.
Yeah, I always find that amazing how once you wear wool, you really enjoy it. So
yeah, it's a good point. One of our customers is a shoe company called Allbirds in San Francisco, and he made the comment that wool is having a moment at the moment. And what that means is that wool is really front of mind for a lot of consumers. We're finding a lot of consumers globally are really looking for products that are real.
now, before we come to a close, I want to ask you one more question. So, as you've been in the industry for a very long time, you travel a lot. So share with us your most favorite experience that you had when working in the wool industry. Could be a trip or, I don't know, a particular moment.
Gosh, there's so many. Do you know, one of the real highlights for me is when I work with some of our retail brand partners and they're engaging with either new customers or their sales teams. So I quite regularly travel to North America and to Europe with the sole focus of providing a connection back to New Zealand to some of our brand partners, consumers, and talking to groups of people that have never set foot on a high country merino property before, that have never seen a merino sheep, and really don't understand how wool is even produced, and being able to share our story about what we do here in New Zealand, and bring that to life for them, is really satisfying. And more importantly, going into their store, and this happened about 18 months ago, going into their store and hearing these salespeople retelling that story to customers, it was a real light bulb moment for me. If we can really engage emotionally with the people that are representing our product, our wool, with the people that are buying it, then I think we've done made a great step to the long term viability and sustainability of our product. So that was one of the highlights. There's dozens of others as well. It's a very privileged position that I have, and that I work with some of the leading brands in the world, and some of the most discerning consumers as well, and so that the highlights come fairly thick and fast. Another highlight of mine, while I'm thinking of it, is also working with our growers, and being able to come back and share with them that, hey, we've just identified this new brand. They're going to be buying ZQ wool. They want to lock in a 3-year forward contract with you, and seeing what that means to them as a family and as a business, knowing that their income is secure for the foreseeable future, is really quite amazing. It's not just about a commercial relationship. It's actually something far more significant than that. It's about families that are farming and their ability to continue farming and to pass that farm onto their children and their children's children. And to me, to be part of that, and to be part of I guess enabling that is why I get up in the morning and why I come to work every day. So yeah, there's a couple.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think what you also do quite a lot is actually bring the brand partners onto your growers' farms, so that they also have this first-hand experience, and actually that they meet up and can talk and exchange.
Absolutely. Absolutely, they do. And I mean, the fundamental premise to our business is about relationships. And we've got presidents and CEOs of some of the biggest names in apparel that have a personal relationship with individual farmers here in New Zealand. They know each other on first name terms. They've brought their children to New Zealand on holidays. Our growers have taken their children on holidays into their countries, and to see these brands develop and these relationships develop is really quite amazing. And as I said, it goes well beyond business. It goes into what a relationship is all about, and that is mutual respect, mutual understanding, and care for each other. So that's to me, the epitome of success.
Well, that's a good way of ending our interview. Now you've provided so much information, but where can our listeners find out more about New Zealand Merino, and find out more about your work?
Yeah, so the best way to find out more about us would be to check our website. We're www.zqmerino.com. So that's ZQMerino.com. And on there you'll find a lot about ZQ, a lot about the New Zealand Merino Company, and a list of contacts there. And I'm fairly certain my name's there somewhere as well. So more than happy to take any questions from people at any time. So
great. Yeah. And I think you also have a fact sheet about that people can access. I think I will also
absolutely
link to that in the show notes. where people can learn a little bit more about wool, etc.
Absolutely. So that's all on our website, and there's some downloadable links there that you can take a look at just to learn more about what we do.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's lots of information, lots of fact sheets, lots of things you can learn from the ZQ Merino website. So I will make sure to link to that. Thank you, Dave, so much for your time today. You provided so much valuable content and information. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, Lisa, anytime.
Great. And then, now it's still very early here in Europe, but it's time for you to head home. I wish you a good evening, and thanks for your time, and all the best for all the work that you're doing.
No worries at all, Lisa, anytime.
Goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this discussion with Dave Maslen from the New Zealand Merino Company. I definitely learned a lot today. I loved all the research that Dave was talking about. If you want to find out more about the work Dave mentioned, you can find all the links in the show notes of today's episode at elisabethvandelden.com/036. Visit elisabethvandelden.com/036. Also, if we are not yet connected on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, I would love to hear from you there as well. Thanks for listening today, and I look forward to catching up with you again next week. Bye for now.